Today I want to talk about how experimenting and playing in our sketchbooks can really help to the development of our style as artists. So when we're just playing, experimenting, um, playing around with mark making, color mixing, layering, that all can help us develop our own personal art style. So I really hope today you'll enjoy the video and consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button. Please pop any questions you may have into the comment section and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Let's get started and I'll meet you inside. So I've been doing a series of these abstracted still lifes in my sketchbooks and just playing around with color and shapes and layering. I'm using Neocolor crayon, marker, and acrylic, and starting out with a color block background that I use in a lot of my contemporary art paintings. It's just sectioning off the paper into 4 to 6 different shapes. And this is a way just to get over that blank white page, and I go in with the idea that anything can be changed. And so at any time, because acrylic is easy to do that with. So here's one that I did in my sketchbook that I just put a color block abstract background in, and then I drew just a little still life here with you know, some of my little things that I keep in the studio for still lifes. Now I don't set the still life up, I just kind of keep things handy on my desk, things I like the shapes of. I may or may not use the handles or think about what's printed on the vessel. Like for instance, I really like, this is in terrible condition, but I love the shape and the shape of the handle and everything about it. And so sometimes I'm just using the shapes. I really love including a fork and a spoon sometimes in my little still lives. I have a whole box of, you know, 70s vintage fruit and vegetables. So I have a lemon here and a banana that I might include in the next one. I have a box of artists' markers here. So, and then so what I'm doing here is I'm using acrylic paint, the artist markers, the Neocolor crayon, and I'm using Neocolor 1, which are the ones that are not water soluble, but you could use either. And I'm just kind of combining these materials and coming up with these little still lifes, which are really fun. So what I do at this point is I just take whatever I'm using as a reference object and I just start putting them in, and I don't really put a lot of thought into where. I just kind of let the composition evolve organically. And I just pick up each object and I'm just sketching them in with the Neocolor ones. Now Neocolor 2 will also work here, but they're going to move a little bit because they're water soluble. It doesn't really matter. I really like both. I have both and I use both all the time. Again, I'm just using the shapes of these objects as a rough reference point, and I'm just looking at everything as a shape at this point, and just kind of playing with the shapes and how they interact with each other and how they relate to each other on the page. and just coming up with a composition. Any of these color blocks, the objects, they can be painted over, they can be changed, they can be reoriented. It's all very easy to do when you're working in acrylic and with these particular materials, because acrylic is really easy to go over. I keep switching colors because, you know, I kind of like to see the interactions of the colors. Sometimes I'll go over this with the artist markers, which also leave a really interesting mark when you combine them with the acrylic paint and the neo color. Everything leaves a different kind of a mark or an imprint, a reaction with the other materials you're using. So that's why I like to switch back and forth. I like to maybe use more than one color when I'm drawing. The shadows, I make a different color than the objects, and I'm looking at the shadows not particularly as, oh, I want to do this really realistic shadow, but I'm looking at them as an opportunity to put another shape down and explore another shape, another color, another reaction, because this really is kind of a little exercise in abstraction. So right now I have my, it's kind of a darker, kind of an aqua green marker, and I'm going around and I'm kind of just defining the shadow shapes that I drew with this color, and I'm going over you know, whatever color is already there, and I'm just kind of darkening up those shapes. Now some of this is getting lost because we already have, you know, the color blocks, and part of what becomes really interesting is that it's going to look different when you go over the different colors. You know, you're going over, you know, some of the background is lighter colors, some of it's darker colors, and that adds to the interest. And every time you go over it with a different color, it changes, and that's also can be really interesting. But because, you know, we're creating different shapes and things, we don't want to lose all those different interesting places. So you need to at some point come back in and redefine some of those values, and so that all kind of evolves as you're going along. So you just have to kind of not lose your perspective. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of defining some of the values, and just finding, the first thing I'm doing is just finding the shadow places. So I'm kind of redrawing in some of those shadowy places, and then you'll see how it begins to evolve from there. So where we have the dark color block and we have a lot of shadows, we've kind of lost some of the values or the differences in values, so the difference between light and dark. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of a different color, a lighter blue paint, and I'm going to change up some of that, and I'm going to get in there in a little while, and I'm going to fix some of those values. And so I'm going to start adding in some of the other colors and some of the other things that are necessary to make this painting or this sketchbook study, I should call it, really start to become a little bit more readable and a little bit more dynamic, and we'll start playing around a little bit. So where I think a lot of the marker might be really thick, you know, when I start painting in these colors, you'll still see it. You'll still see the marker lines and and the color and the neo color and all that, it all still shows, but it starts to integrate with the paint and it all becomes a lot more cohesive. And you'll start to see that evolve. And it's still just a really quick little study, but all the pieces start to come together and you'll see how that all starts to evolve. And it's just a really organic and free kind of process. A lot of times when you're building these layers, you will need more than one layer of paint or one layer of crayon or one layer of marker to go over when you're building up layers over darker paint or something like that. I usually go in with, thinner layers in the beginning and then build up a little bit thicker layers. But I really love a lot of times just letting some of those under layers come through just a little bit, so you can still see the paint underneath. I love letting some of the crayon or marker come through. Some of the line work come through, like in the banana you could really see it, and I really like that. That's just like interesting to me. I really love the way that looks. You can see me adding a lot of white into the yellow paint in the beginning layers, and that's because the white I'm using is titanium white and it is very opaque, and for the initial layers it helps me build a foundation that will cover those darker colors. And so I'm creating a tint with the cadmium yellow light, which is not a very powerful color, and I would have to use a lot more paint to get the kind of coverage I'm getting if I weren't mixing it with the white. And that's just a little thing I do in the initial layers, and then you could see I went in with more pure color to go over the top and add a little bit more chroma. Here I'm mixing some blue with a little bit of the titanium white, and I'm redefining the areas that are not in shadow so that my shadow areas pop out a little better. It was just a little bit too close in value, and so I was losing those beautiful shapes that the shadows created. So now I'm going back in with a blue closer to the other background color, and then I'm redefining the areas that are not in shadow. I'm blending a little bit back into the background there, and it's really making those shadows pop out. And that's what I wanted to accomplish, because the shapes of the shadows and those dark values are really going to help things pop out as I go along in this composition and continue to define all the elements in it. So now you can really see the shapes of the shadows and the elements of the fruit, and everything is starting to work a little bit better in the composition. So now I'm really losing the shape of the picture. So I'm going to go in with kind of a yellow ochre color. It looks actually gold on the camera, but it isn't. It's like a darker yellow ochre, like a more of an earth tone. And I'm just going to go ahead and define the shape of the picture, because I'm really losing it with all that blue that just blends right into the background. So I'm just going to go into that, and I'm going to put in this kind of darker yellow earth tone to define this particular shape, and give it its own place in the composition. and let it stand out on its own a little bit without being overwhelming. We're kind of losing it into the background as it is. So that's what I'm working on next here. And every little thing you do and every change you make affects the final piece. So if you don't like this, I mean, there's no reason that you can't. Any one thing or any one change you make could always be changed again. I mean, if I didn't like this, I would just change it another time, you know. I could change it with another color. I could change it. I could make it darker. I could make it lighter. I could make a shade of this color by adding some black, or a tone by adding some gray to it. You know, there's so many different ways we can adjust things or change things. I'm trying to keep a very simple color palette and not add too many colors, because I don't want it to get too muddy. So I'm just, you know, trying to keep things simple and play with the values, the composition, and I'm trying to explore mostly composition, value, and just the positioning of the objects on the page and all that other stuff. And I'm really enjoying having fun. It's like moving puzzle pieces around. So that's what I really love about sketchbook work, because it's just really enjoyable and you can really have fun playing with the elements in your sketchbook. And no one really ever has to see any of this stuff. This is just all for you, and it's really fun playtime. And there and you know, to create that little darker color, I just added a slight amount of black to the yellow ochre, and I created a shade of that color to make that dark shadow up on top. And now, because the body of the picture has dried a little bit, I'm going to put another layer of the color on top. And now I can kind of smooth it out, because you can see, because it's such a lighter color, yellow sometimes has a little bit more trouble covering. I'm going to put another layer on. I did not need to add white to the yellow ochre just because it's already a very opaque color. Whereas like a cadmium yellow is not going to be as thick and opaque as yellow ochre, which is a much creamier, thicker color. So, you know, just a lot of times when you're going over a darker, stronger, pigmented color with a lighter color like a yellow or some of the pinks or magentas, you need to maybe do more than one coat, which is fine with acrylic. I usually start with a thin coat and go over it. And I add, if I want to add some, you know, thicker paint at the end of the painting, that's when I do it. I don't do it in the beginning layers. At this point, I can actually start to see, you know, the direction that this is heading in. And honestly, I'm really always looking to try to get these things to evolve in an organic fashion. But, you know, I'm making decisions based on, you know, each decision I've made previously. So right now I'm, you know, going in and, you know, just trying to figure out what my next move is, and looking at, you know, of course, right now I've got some neo colors out, and I'm layering over them with kind of a dark green, which is pulling out some really interesting highlights in the shadow part of this. And I really am liking the color interactions, and I really like the way that came out and the way it looked. And obviously, because of the way that the color blocks were laid down, they're gonna look different in over the different colors. So even if we've taken out a lot of the color or we've painted over some of it, it's still going to layer differently, which, is, really interesting. And then I may go over some of the drawing part of it and some of the line work with the Neo colors. I really love these crayons. They are like the best adult crayons I've found. I really love them. Now, I don't like how thick the marker was on this, so I'm just going to kind of redefine some of the line work on this little vessel that I drew. And again, this is like a little cup or a vessel with a handle that, I left the handle off. I just really love the shape of this thing. And I put it in some of my still lifes sometimes, and sometimes they make it huge so it looks like a giant garden urn or something, and then other times I make it so it looks like a cup. And I mean, I'm just looking for shapes when I'm looking for these things, and honestly, I get a lot of them at the thrift shop or a tag sale or yard sale. I'm just looking at shapes to interact with. I love the fake fruit, which was a big popular thing a long time ago. So a lot of times you can find that at, a garage sale or a yard sale. And it's really great because you don't have to worry about it going bad. It's not wasting food. It's, it's really nice to have it in the studio because it's always just there. I just throw the whole bag in my car and take it to classes sometimes, and we just, paint it in my teaching studio. But it's nice to have here because I can just grab it and use it. I decided to get rid of that color black, but I think I changed it yet again. Everything can change, and that's what I love about working with acrylic paint, because it is really easy to change it. So much easier than so many other mediums. And I do love the way that all of these other things can layer over it, and it comes through just a little bit. So yeah, this is what I like. I like to be able to play and change and have the piece morph. At this point, I really start to look at things, and I think that this, the cup, I really felt like the white was too stark for it, so I'm just gonna come in with like this kind of a lighter value pink color, and I'm just gonna let that be a pink cup. I mean, I'm not going too crazy with it. I this is just a very short little study here. I'm having a lot of fun making it, and just a interesting little value study, study. I'm adding some of that pink into my line work here on the vase. It's good to repeat that color around your painting. A lot of times, this is, of course, not a finished painting, but, that is something that I like to do, is pull colors that I use someplace in a painting. I like to pull that color around a little bit so that it's integrated into other parts of the painting, and it ties everything together. And, a lot of times people aren't aware you're doing it, but it really does pull things together when you start working this way. I'm just touching up and refining here. Just doing a couple little things, touching up and refining. And then I have one more thing I really want to address, which is the fact that I took the color block out in the center background, and it really does affect the composition. So what I've decided to do, instead of going in with paint and putting in a solid color block, I've decided to go in with the Neo colors and do mark making instead, having that blue color come through kind of a cadmium red dark crayon with mark making, and redefine that area of the color block, and just put that little place back in and allow the background color to come through. It creates a very dynamic diagonal pull across the page that gives your eye a place to move. So you can see how when you go in with not a lot of expectations about the end result, and you're just going in with the idea of playing with materials in your sketchbook and letting things evolve on their own, you can really come up with some interesting concepts, ideas, ways of working with your materials that you hadn't thought of before. And sometimes you'll get some really interesting things popping up. I hope you can find some time for some experimental play in your own sketchbook. Try layering materials, mixing things together, and just have fun. Please let me know how you're doing and what you're working on in the comments section below. Thanks for being here, and please come again soon.